How's it going, everybody? Today we have a very, very special guest on this channel. His name is Dr. Scott Resnick. Funny because we actually have a mutual friend, well, actually my mom, who met you, is friends with you, and she told me about everything you were doing, helping people with chronic fatigue syndrome. Right. Obviously, you have a background in this as well. So the whole purpose of bringing this video together for you guys is to shed some light on CFS and how to recover from it, and actually a doctor's perspective. Right. Because you've actually gone through the medical system. That's right. And gone through all the training. So this is going to be a really cool video, a cool insight to a doctor who understands both sides, like the medical system side, but also he's been through it himself. That's right. Which is extremely, extremely rare. So this is going to be a super valuable one. So stay tuned. And I can't wait to dive more into your story. So great to have you on here.
Good to see you. I feel really lucky to be here and talking to you because we sort of had these parallel journeys for some time, and we're only, 50 miles apart from each other.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we had an opportunity to, come up here and meet and talk about this stuff. And
yes,
I think what we'll offer for your viewers is, an opportunity to see that when we really need to be working towards fatigue, we need to be looking at it from a lot of different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And I know that really your specialty is all the different things we can do with our mind, right? And this neuroplasticity and the way that we can create our realities and determine what it is that we want to experience in life, as opposed to having occurrences in life really kind of mandate how we respond to them, right? It's kind of the wrong way to do it. I've got the perspective of having, being a doctor and knowing that I just know how hard it is for people to go to the doctors and feel, gaslit. They feel disregarded. They feel like they're not being listened to. It's like, how many of the people that you work with have said, my doctor said it's in my head, I need an antidepressant?
Almost everybody.
I was going to say, is it 100%?
It's like 99.9%.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting is that, I've got a personal story that I'll share with you. So through myself, I realized that we didn't have quite as a medical doctors, the resources to address fatigue. And part of that problem is what is fatigue? It's a subjective measure, it's a subjective thing, right? So it's not like I can say, okay, Miguel, we're gonna send you off to the lab. Get your fatigue level here. Yeah. So we can't do that. And that's one of the things which is so hard, is that from the start, it's a subjective experience, which means that to everybody, it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe just introduce yourself to everybody.
Okay.
So, name, obviously, a bit of your background, how long you've been in medicine for.
Hey everyone, my name is Scott Resnick. I'm a medical doctor. I was formerly trained as an obstetrician gynecologist, spending years in the hospital. I know you've all seen kind of like the Grey's Anatomy type stories of, working 120 hours a week. Well, after 4 years of medical school, and then I did 6 years of postgraduate training where I was literally up every third night working, continually. So I think that kind of primed the pump for, what would later become the struggle I had with fatigue. And then I went to finishing my residency in obstetrics and gynecology. I went to work in a small town in New Mexico, and where I was one of the few obstetrician gynecologists. And as much as we'd like to figure out how we can get babies to be delivered in the middle of the day, they come in the middle of the night. So again, I've done 4 years of medical school, 6 years of postgraduate training. Then I'm in an environment where any emergency can happen at any hour of the day. So, your adrenaline is really high. But what was interesting is what I discovered, this is probably about 2005, was that for all my patients that other doctors had recommended surgical interventions for, I was approaching it differently. I was using diet and looking into their nutritional status and how is their mind influencing their their behaviors and their perception of how they were feeling. And what I found is that a lot of my surgical patients actually didn't need to have surgery, because I would use, I'd work with their gut, or I'd work with balancing their hormones or fix their thyroid and things like that. So I started to get some different perspectives. And then in about 2010, I started taking a course with a group called American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and was fellowship trained in anti-aging and regenerative medicine. And that's when you take a deep dive into, what is just all different ways of looking at what constitutes medicine and health. And what I discovered is that, we're trained as allopathic doctors, and I'd been an allopathic doctor for 20 years. And I was like, I'm going to look this up in the dictionary.
Yeah.
What does this mean? What does that mean? And what it means is it means that you're using a drug to turn around a symptom.
Oh, got it.
That's it. So there's never any investigation at all into what's precipitated that symptom. So, and that's really the foundation of all medicine. And so there's a group of doctors and naturopaths and chiropractors and, nutritionists who are saying, wait a minute, we need to ask some different questions, because when we start to ask some different questions, we can get some different perspectives from which we can get people healed. So it's that first step of saying, yes, formerly I was trained to be an allopathic doctor. Come in with your symptoms. I designate a diagnosis. It's got a diagnosis code.
Yeah.
There's a medicine that we use to treat that diagnosis, and you're out the door. In allopathic medicine, the premise is just to pick a drug. I mean, you've got a diagnosis code, and a drug to match that. But it really doesn't offer any insight into what's precipitating that symptom. And so there's a movement around the country where we're starting to ask some different questions, like what can we do differently to not just medicate or cover symptoms, but to actually get into the workings of what's driving a condition and to start getting people better. And in 2014, I became a fatigue patient myself. So it was, I was leaving the town that I'd been in northern New Mexico, and I'd been there for 15 years. I had been building a house. I was selling a house. I was buying a house and closing a medical practice and moving to an entirely different community.
Stress was just
and then that doesn't even get started, because it turned out that I had to finish building this one house in order to take all the belongings we had in this rental house we were in and move it into the house we'd built, but take half of the stuff and move it.
chaos.
Just chaos. And I became a fatigue patient. So I really believed that this was on the tail end of having done all that training and all those late nights. It just primed me to have that last little stimulus where I kind of lost control over, my ability to control my stress.
Yeah.
And my primary symptoms were, horrible brain fog.
Yeah.
I remember when I really realized that something was wrong is I was driving my car and it was mid-afternoon. And I'm sure you and your viewers have all had this happen, right? Where it seems like the road is kind of like waving, like the waves of heat are starting to massage you. And I literally had to pull over on the side of the road, not once, but on different days, to take a nap at like 2, 3 in the afternoon. And so I was like, wait a minute, this is not right. So, I went to my doctor and I said, do some testing. Let's figure out what's wrong, what's going on. And of course, everything came back normal. What he'd done is just basic blood panel, basic chemistries, maybe check my TSH, which is a marker for thyroid. And I was told that everything was normal.
Yeah. But I didn't feel normal at all.
No, I didn't feel normal at all. And so that kind of, all these years I've been studying this functional medicine, this different way of looking at medicine. I then developed my own VIP patient, who was myself. And what I found was for me is that my fatigue is really dependent on my stress response and my
Cortisol. Sorry, like God's stress response.
Yeah. So when I, and it changes too. So what happened is that by the time I measured my cortisol, for normal cortisol patterns is supposed to have a nice curve, it goes up in the night, it comes down during the day. Mine was flat. Mm-hmm. I basically had no cortisol, and cortisol is effectively the hormone that drives our ability to generate energy, to make our brain work, make our heart work. Mm-hmm. So for me, starting in 2014 and really continuing through today, it's my understanding of the different factors that can, that drive that stress response. Because I find that if I let it control me as opposed to me controlling it, that I can easily backslide back into, being up to
get more tired, like less able to do things and handle stress. So
exactly.
Yeah, let's rewind the clock a little bit. So take us back to when you first started feeling your symptoms. Did it all hit you at once, or was it slow and then it kind of snowballed over time? And when it did, when did it look like at your worst?
Right. And so,
because that's the thing with a lot of people watching, they see me and you, and they're like, "Oh, you guys are normal, right? You guys really have this." I don't know if you can experience what I experienced.
Hey, but let's take a quick break there, okay? Because I want to say that the two of us are living proof that you can get better. Right? I mean, it takes work, it takes ongoing work, and I hope that everyone who's listening to this understands that it's not like I said, "Oh, I'm a fatigue patient. Everything got better. I'm fine." I mean, this is something that I know you need to keep track of, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I'm walking on eggshells or anything, but I do have to be responsible.
Right.
Of course, because I think my natural mental state is to just like go. I still have that trait.
Right.
So I have to keep that in check. And if I'm working a lot and I start getting tired, like with a tiny bit of brain fog, it's like, all right, Miguel, remember what happened last night? But it's not like out of fear anymore, which that's what it was before, because now I know how to get out of it. And I know what put me into it in the first place.
So you asked me, I kind of got a little off track there.
Yeah.
You asked, did I notice it? Did it hit me right away, or was it something which was progressive?
Yeah.
And obviously, when you're in the throes of it, when you're in the thick of it, it's really kind of hard to take a step back and know. But in retrospect, I would say that it was kind of like a curve like this. Like it was smoldering, and then I kind of hit this point where I pushed myself to a point where I just didn't have the reserves anymore. So I remember at the time, like looking back and saying, yeah, I'd kind of noticed that my energy had been down a little bit. I wasn't sleeping as well. My libido was out the door, and I wrote it off for different reasons. It's so easy to try to justify it or answer it. But it was really when I was falling asleep driving my car that I said, okay, this is really something wrong.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the typical signs. I wasn't having fevers. I wasn't sick. I didn't have a virus. I didn't have a infection. I didn't have a cancer. So I had to start to look at what could have precipitated that. And for me, I think what was most eye-opening for me was my cortisol was so bad. And I'm sure that you talked to your viewers about cortisol. I mean,
We actually, a little bit, because a lot of them have adrenal fatigue, and I know I had adrenal fatigue, but we treated everything we could on the adrenal side, and it made me worse. Actually, interesting, like ashwagandha, all that stuff.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, so you found that using some of those herbs actually was less helpful.
Yeah. Well, it helped me temporarily, but the thing is, I didn't change my habits. So
There you have it.
it's like, it gave me energy, and I'm like, oh, great, I have energy, so let me continue doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Which is silly.
Right. And then that's the whole trick. As I think it's really important to learn how to be the best measurement of yourself, right? And to recognize like when you're feeling calm, when you're breathing well, for example, because I can even tell, as I'm sure you can, that when I'm getting anxious about something, I'm taking these little short breaths. That's not oxygenating my body. That's not allowing me to help to modulate my stress response. So even little things like when I kind of feel that building, you learn to just say, just a sec.
Yeah, you see the signs. You definitely see the signs. And I think in the past, like what happened with me is it's almost as if you're driving through the city and like you're seeing all these signs that say slow down,
Right.
yellow light, red light, and you're just kind of running through everything. It's like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. Like I have a strong mindset. I could just push through this.
Right.
And eventually you crash the car.
Right.
Or you hit a curb or something, and then your body forces you to stop. It's like, hey, hello, we've been trying to tell you this whole time, slow down.
Right.
You've been ignoring us, so now we're not asking you anymore, we're telling you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we see a lot of people, sadly, is when the car has already crashed. Right.
Yeah.
And you see it in, probably stress, anxiety, depression, a lot of fear, right?
Tons of fear.
Fear of what could happen, what has happened. And what I see in my practice is I see that we begin to manifest those responses in our physical body.
Absolutely.
And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to who have, said, I underwent, I had my 3 kids, my husband's business crashed, we got a divorce, my favorite dog died, the stories go on. And then what happens? They get a breast cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
They have a colon cancer. There's, there's really some, they develop an autoimmune disease. And so I think that's where, that's where a lot of people sadly, came into my practice when it was, the horse was out of the barn, so to speak. I mean, they'd already crashed. And I think that if I could give a gift to people out there who are watching this video, it's like really take some time to listen to your body, think about what signals your body is telling you. In other words, if you're like, I'm always feeling like this tightness in my chest or my heart's beating too fast, your heart might be beating too fast,
Yeah.
If you're like, what's happened to my belly? It's like, I can't get comfortable. My bowel function isn't working well. I'm having diarrhea or I'm having poop every 4 days.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something going on, because I think that the human body is amazing, and we have this incredible resiliency to heal. But as we were talking about before we started this, this talk, the human animal is interesting because we are the only animal that has the ability to drive our physiology with nothing more than our mind, right? So we were talking about zebras, grazing on the savannah. I mean, a zebra is not grazing and thinking to itself, okay, the next time I get chased by a tiger, what am I going to do? I'm going to run towards a cliff, but I can't run towards a cliff because it'll be trapped. So maybe I need to fake right and go left. And, they're not doing that. So, if they're running from a tiger, they're running from a tiger. If they're grazing, they're grazing. We as humans have the ability to sort of create this reality that can build our stress, either based on episodes that have happened in the past that we can do nothing about because it's in the past, right? Or even worse, something that could potentially happen in the future. And I think that, one of the the secrets, I think, to really learning how to heal is learning how to be in the present. So what do you think?
That's exactly what I tell my viewers too. It's if you think about it like a timeline, like if you're the more you're able to live in like a close timeline, as in like today, tomorrow, yesterday,
Right.
anything further than that into the future and past, it brings on a lot of stress.
Right.
Either like depression about the past or anxiety about the future.
Right.
That really perpetuates it can perpetuate a lot of symptoms in the body.
Right.
Symptoms in your body, I think I see it as like a feedback mechanism. Like your body's trying to tell you something. They don't just randomly happen. There's usually a reason for it. Not always a reason. Right. So it's not like you're just feeling this thing in your chest for no reason. There's something behind that.
Yep. So that's what I think that's one of the hardest skills, and it's actually one of the most valuable skills.
Yeah,
I've learned, and I can tell you that it's an ongoing practice. It's hard to do.
Yeah, I find myself falling into that trap. Like if there's a ton of work or there's 5 or 6 application calls in a day, and it's like a roller coaster, emotional roller coaster. I'll find myself like breathing shallow, or I'll feel tightness in my chest, like nothing like before, but I'll feel different.
Right.
So I'll have to like mentally check out or go for a walk or something and just like bring myself back to my baseline.
Right.
Because I know that freight train mind, it will start going and it can slow.
Right. And I think you and I are probably similar in the fact that, both probably like, A-type personality. Very A-type. I like getting a lot of stuff done. I like making stuff happen. I like helping people. I like communicating like this. And it's easy for me to kind of get into a mindset where that starts to drive me. And I think part of the secret is to say, okay, I'm really jazzed about something. I'm reading about some biochemical pathway or something. It's easy for me to dive into that at 11 o'clock at night. I'm sitting in front of my computer screen. I'm typing away. I'm writing something. I'm going to make a quick video.
Yeah. Well,
then what happens? 1:30 hits, 2 a.m, and you know how it is. We're like, wide awake, right?
Yeah.
So I can't do that, so I'm just worrying that there are like some behaviors, some patterns that, my wife told me at one point that I was addicted to thinking. And
it's probably like every single one of these people watching right now.
Right.
This is probably like the 10th video they watched all day too. Like they're just thinking of solutions. And that's the thing with a type A personality. It's like, that's kind of what got them in this illness. Mm-hmm. But then that's what can keep them stuck as well, because they're in that rabbit hole of looking for information, and it's not necessarily their fault because they are looking for a solution. Right. It's just so hard to find that information.
Right. And you'd really tapped into a point that I'm really impassioned about right now. Yeah. Is that, so many people are stuck because, we've got our allopathic, conventional, mainstream. Yeah. Your blood count's fine. Your thyroid's perfect. Leave me alone. Take this antidepressant or get out.
Exactly. Pretty much.
And then on the flip side, we've got whatever's on the internet. So there's so many healers and gurus and diets and supplements and nutritional recommendations and detoxes and all this stuff. So where do people turn, right? And what I believe is that there's kind of like there's a coherent middle ground. But what's hard, and so I've been talking to a lot of people recently and asking them, like, what's more difficult? Is it your fatigue, or is it not knowing where to go? And so what do you think about that? I'm sure
that's a great question. I think initially it's the fatigue, but then what really amplifies the fatigue and other symptoms is that anxiety about like searching, going down the Google rabbit holes. And we actually call them like networks of doom.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Certain forums or certain Facebook groups, everybody's just dumping questions in there. Mm-hmm. Does anybody have these 10 symptoms? I'm experiencing this. Did you have a solution? Right. Did you try this? Did you try this? And it's just like a frenzy.
Right. So it is. It's like, so someone says, I'm tired in the morning. What should I do? And they get 65 responses to say, take this, take this, take this, take this. Crazy. And people wind up taking everything. I've got a quick anecdote for you, which is interesting. So I am in an old medical practice I had in Chattanooga, Tennessee. When I opened it, I didn't know the community, and I just said, hey, I'm a functional medicine doctor. Come in and talk to me, no charge. We'll talk for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I mean, if I had an open slot in the day, might as well meet with somebody, hoping that they would be my patient over time. And a lot of people actually converted because, I don't know, because they liked what they saw. But I remember sitting with one woman one time, and she literally came in with, I kid you not, a shopping bag of supplements. Yeah. So she was taking something like $900 a month worth of supplements. And I said, just out of curiosity, why did you choose to do this? And she's like rummaging through this bag, and she kind of comes up with the bottle, and she goes, my hairdresser recommended this, and something else, and my chiropractor recommended this, and my best friend recommended this. And I said, hold on, let's stop for a second. Let's go forward on the premise that each one of these nutrients has biological properties. In other words, it's like taking a medicine. I mean, you never say, oh, I'm sick. oh, my hairdresser gave me this antibiotic and somebody else gave me this medication, you know?
Yeah.
So why not look at our supplementation in that same way? And I said, and she's like, do you think you can help me, doctor? And I said, I'll tell you what, why do we do this? You know, who knows how all these different herbs and nutrients and, whatever, ions, magnesium, she's taking all kinds of stuff. So we don't know how this stuff interacts with each other. Nobody's studied this. There will never be a study. Now, we might learn about that with computers in the future, but that's another discussion. I said, do this. I said, tell me that you're going to take this bag and not take any of this stuff. Now, these are supplemental, right? They're supplements.
Supplements. Right? So it's a supplement.
You're supposed to supplement good sleep, exactly diet, a good mind-body practice, right? A good balance of activity and athleticism, right? And now so many people are tired. It's like, doc, are you expecting me to go out and train in the gym? No, but I'm hopeful that people are going to get up and move around a little bit. But anyways, the end of the story is that she came back into my office because I still wasn't filling my practice, a month later. And she said, doc, I feel great. Yeah. She said, I feel good. I'm saving $1,000 a month. And I said, great. Well, congratulations. That was beneficial. So, so I've actually seen some people get hurt by using the wrong supplements, using the wrong nutrients. And, there are a few that are more common than others. But I think we need to be careful about that and try to find a middle ground. I mean, in my practice, if I had a patient on more than 5 supplements at a time, I'd say, okay, wait, let's take a step back and make sure that we know what we're addressing. Mm-hmm. So I've never been one of these doctors who feels like you need to be taking 10 things. Yeah. If you're taking 10 things, you're probably not really identifying what the processes are that you want to be fixing.
Exactly. I 100% agree, because I see that a lot. Like, some people spend thousands a month on supplements, and they'll send me a picture. And even in our program, there will be a lot of people sharing their wins. And there was this one guy, he posted, I used to be on all of these supplements. Mm-hmm. Now I'm on like one of them, but they're like 20 bottles. Yeah. And everybody else started posting, yeah, me too. I look at my stash. And there's like 20, 30, 40 different bottles. Right. And then they become like kind of traumatized to take any kind of medicine or supplement. Exactly. Because it's just, you're exactly right. But how do you know what's counteracting with what? Right. This medication cancels that out or makes this worse. So it's just a huge mess.
And we don't know. Yeah. If we're making the assumption that these are actually influencing our biology, and I think the science shows us that we can change the way our genetics work. We can drive some biochemical pathways by our diet or by some supplementation. Then, what happens when all these different medicines, we use, call medicines supplements, when they interact with one another.
Yeah. And I really feel for people who are on a lot of supplements and they feel like they can't get off because they feel like, if I go off, I'm just going to crash hard. Right. Because that used to be me. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily their fault, because like either they were recommended by the doctor or naturopath. Next thing you know, they're taking like 15 things. Yeah. I think at my peak, at my worst, I was completely bedridden. Mm-hmm. Completely bedridden.
And I've seen photographs of it. It's brutal. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I was taking probably 20 or 30, I think like 30 pills a day or something. Mm-hmm. And one time my dad asked me, he's like, wait a minute, you have all these vitamins on the side of your bed. Mm-hmm. Write down everything you're taking. And I wrote everything down, and he was shocked. Mm-hmm. He was like, Miggy, if I took all of this stuff, I'd probably be feeling this sick. Yeah. So no wonder you're feeling horrible. You got to stop this. I was like, I can't, Dad. Like, this is like my lifeline, right? Life support, basically. So how do you kind of approach, taking people off supplements, just out of curiosity? I mean, it's tricky, right?
No, that's a good question. And I think that, my approach basically says, there's an old adage in medicine, which is you can't manage what you can't measure. Yeah. Right. So the first thing is that what I try to do is using history, using physical examination, using inputs we can get from even something simple like having a talk with somebody, is to try to assess where they might have deficiencies or excesses. And then what I like to do is I like to use, good scientific measurements to make assessments of their nutritional status. Make an assessment of the way that their cortisol, which we talked about earlier, right? Thyroid, which is kind of like our thermostat of our body. So as you get more hypothyroid in a low thyroid state, you're sluggish. It's, you kind of feel like the sloth, right? And then the other, hormone, which is so important for people, is insulin, right? And that's, the hormone which is associated with obesity. Right. Yeah. So the first thing I would do is make measurements and say, look, based on your history, we're not going to measure everything. We're going to try to do some selective testing, because based on your history, your family history, your dietary choices, where you live, we might need to be focusing on some things rather than others. And what I really believe is I feel like, we need to, let me think. So when I work with patients, and this will interest you, okay, is there's sort of like a trifecta of things we need to look at. And so I think that when it comes to fixing fatigue, there are three components that work together, right? So there's our biology, right? And, this is like, we need the right kind of fats, and we need amino acids, and we need magnesium and zinc and, all these different nutrients that our body just needs to drive the machinery, okay? Then we have the environment, right? And you can actually ask yourself, what is your environment? I mean, if you live in, downtown Chicago by the elevated trains, and there's a lot of, there's trucks idling outside your apartment. There's trains going by every 10 minutes or something like that. Well, you've got an environment where you've got light pollution and noise pollution and, maybe some air pollution. Or if your environment is a, like an overbearing boss, or like a bad relationship, like like emotional stuff. So, or if you live in Flint, Michigan, and your kid is drinking, water that has mercury in it. So that's part of this trifecta of getting better. Okay. So it's the environment. It's taking a moment to say, wow, okay, I live in Arizona. What's the chance that you have Lyme disease? It's not zero, but it's pretty small. It's not like someone who's in Connecticut, right? Or Massachusetts, where there's lots and lots of Lyme, so these are the people who, you get some history and try to get a sense of what can be contributing to their fatigue that's in their environment. And then the question is, what can we change, right?
Yeah.
And that's often the hard thing. It's not like everyone can just say, oh, I've got a crappy boss, I'm gonna go find another job. Yeah, it's not that easy. So the next step is what can we do with our biology, right? So it's the environment, our biology, and then the mind. So those three things, I believe, are kind of like the three legs of the stool that we need to be addressing to get people fully better with fatigue. And it doesn't mean we need to measure every test. Doesn't mean we need to take every supplement like we were talking about. But I think people individually can. Even I think viewers of this video here could actually take a step back and say, what are some of the things that are in my environment that I could influence, like here and now? All right. So, and these are things that people know about, like diet, right? So, here's a quick quiz. What's better for you? Nice fresh vegetables or frozen something that you pop in the microwave?
Definitely the frozen microwave stuff.
Yeah, of course. You know that. It's tasty. It's salty. It tastes so good. It tastes so good. It's so easy.
It's delicioso. It's not delivery. It's delicioso.
Right. So these are some simple things that, that someone could even ask themselves, like, okay, what percentage of my diet, again, this is part of your environment that you can control, right? We can control what we put in our mouth, right? We can even control the quality of our water to some degree. I mean, what does a Brita filter cost? It's $30 or something like that. And it takes out 99% of bacteria and all the heavy metals, so we can begin to make some choices about how we can modify our biology, just with some simple questions like that. Yeah, we're trying to put our minds together to give you all the best information that we have to help you on your road to recovery, right? Because I'm of the belief, and this is having worked with, being a fatigue survivor, right? A thriver. There we go. Myself, having worked with, probably hundreds, if not thousands of patients. Yeah. That I know that people can get better. And I think if there's like, for you who are on the Instagram Live, right? You get to go cut to the chase right at the start. Like, you folks can get better. Some people might have a longer path than others. I think the bottom line is to be patient with one's recovery, because if you're not patient with recovery and you start living in the future, and then there's that increased stress and frustration that kind of makes us go one step forward and two steps back. Right. So just to reiterate, we were talking about how in my medical practice, I'm a functional medicine doctor. I've been doing this for 15 years, really focusing with fatigue. That I kind of look at my patient's health and my own health, really, for that matter, in a trifecta, right? And that trifecta is looking at our biology, our environment that we find ourselves in, and then lastly, what really you're the specialist at, is how our mind kind of keeps us in a feed forward process, right? So what are the steps that we can do to interrupt this? Because it's almost like we need to kind of stop the reality that we're living in, remove ourselves a little bit, and almost become an observer for a moment, right? And I think that's easier said than done, right? Because when we're embroiled in it, when you don't have the energy to get up to make it to your doctor's office, to follow up on the exercises that you're supposed to be working on, it's hard. but I really think that everyone who's watching this has the potential.
Yeah, I think everybody's too, because we've seen extreme cases. I mean, I was an extreme case,
Right.
and there's so many people in the program right now, extreme cases, and they've done it really well. They've turned it around. So I'm just curious for you, what kind of cases have you seen? What are some of the cases that stick out in your mind of like, wow, that lady or that man was really jacked up, like they were in the trenches, but they were able to turn it around.
And I have to say that I'll have to think about a couple of individual cases. My disclaimer is that I tend to see things more from the from the medical side.
Yeah.
And I think that probably some of the more remarkable cases that I've seen are really people driving themselves to a greater state of physical illness, right? So let's just take your story for example. Let's just imagine that you weren't able to get out of bed, right? And you were still in bed. What happens? Then you start getting some bed sores.
Exactly.
And those bed sores, then those bed sores get infected. And then, oh yeah, your doctor forgot to put you on a blood thinner because you haven't moved in days, so you get a blood clot.
Yeah.
And then you get a blood clot, and now you need to be on a blood thinner for the next 6 months or 12 months or something like that. So I think what happens is when we lose control of kind of the medical side of things, it's a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, probably the most impressive patients that I remember seeing probably are people who either worried themselves into a state of infertility, cancers. Unquestionably, as our stress levels go up, our cortisol, our primary stress hormone goes up. That increases our blood pressure.
Yeah.
It increases our pulse.
Gives you like 30 or 40 more symptoms. Right?
Yeah, it gives you 30 or 40, when your cortisol's not working well, your insulin doesn't work as well. We alluded earlier in this talk to the fact that, insulin is the one hormone that is strongly associated with all of the diabetes, obesity. And then you look at something like diabetes, it's like, then that increases your risk of heart disease and stroke and cancers. So what happens is people would tend to get on a slippery slope. And I think that for me, it's funny because I should have thought about this before we talked, but I don't have any, I've got a few patients who kind of stick out in my mind. Not necessarily people who've, had like miraculous recoveries so much. More people, like we were talking earlier about how, you need to be careful about taking all these different supplements. So I have a patient who, basically had that bag of supplements we were talking about earlier. She got herself toxic on B6. This is well documented that B6 is a toxicity. But what happens is that, so many of these supplements, you'll take this thing for your stress response, and it's got ashwagandha and, cordyceps or something, and B6. And then you've got your adrenal support, and it has that and B6. And there's kind of like, and there's 15 milligrams here and 12 milligrams here and 27 here. And, before long, she was taking, I think she added it up, and she's like, I was taking 120 milligrams of B6. Probably need 15 milligrams a day. Like there's overdoing it. So she was, and so what happened was that she actually developed like numbness in her extremities that at the time that I saw her, she'd had for 6 months to a year. So was she able to treat it? I don't know if it ever really fully got better. So there are a lot of different manifestations of how once again how our mind can then guide our biology, and that's what makes it so unique about as animals, is that we can influence our physiology by a thought. And we talked earlier on, maybe dolphins can do it, maybe whales because they're pretty smart.
Yeah.
Primates,
monkeys.
Yeah, monkeys. I'm sure, I know that monkeys get worried about stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen enough videos of you got the alpha baboon and the beta, and you can see the beta kind of sitting back there worrying that something's going to happen. But short of that, I mean, so that's where healing really starts, is in the mind.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about what you do, is because you need to take first steps. In other words, if you can't get your mind right, you're not going to be able to take the subsequent steps to see what other kind of changes you need to make to sleep better, to breathe better, to move better, to poop better. All these different things that over time get us, we start feeling better.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the exact cases that we get. Like, we usually get the people who have literally tried like pretty much everything and, got their tests and scans and everything else ruled out, or maybe there were issues and they already treated it, or they are treating it and they're continuing to decline.
Right.
So if they're treating the physiological issue, and doing everything they need to do that the doctors are telling them to do, and they're still getting worse, then there's a huge missing component, which is the mind,
right?
Which is they're driving themselves into a completely stressed state,
right?
And then with that, like we've seen so many cases where people turn things around. They can turn things around fairly quickly sometimes.
Yep.
It's insane. That's why we're very selective on who we let into the program too. Mindset is so crucial. Like, right, there's certain questions where if they don't answer them in a certain way, right, I'm like, it may not be a good fit.
Yeah, I'm never going to get better.
Yeah,
Well, keep telling yourself that, and you're probably never going to get better.
exactly.
I mean, like some simple things like that. It's really fascinating. I mean, because the mind is so powerful, and what's interesting is that we start thinking about the mind, and you look at, I mean, this is good, contemporary science of neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Right. And so neuroplasticity means the ability to modify our neural networks. And Dr. Dispenza talks about nerves that are wired together fire together. So if all we're firing are the nerves that are keeping us in this fight or flight, this nervous, fearful, I can't get better
Survival mode.
that's the reality that we're living in.
Yeah.
We create that, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the most important steps that was actually, I would say missing in my medical practice is just what you do. I mean, I would sit with my patients and say, look, we need to change your mindset. Let me kind of show you how to breathe. Let's talk about some basic yoga poses maybe that you could do to open up your lungs, to start to breathe better.
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit of movement into the body. But I didn't have the kind of engagement that you do, and I think that that's so important. That it's almost like it's almost like a contract, right? That you make with your clients. Like, it's like, look, we'll be there for you.
You got to show up. You got to show up. You got to be open-minded enough to absorb what we're telling you and just overall try your best. Like, don't be closed off.
Right.
So when you were on your journey, just out of curiosity, how bad did it get for you? Were you bedridden at one point?
No,
housebound? You got to stop working?
Never got that bad. But it got to the point where I was dragging. But what's interesting for me is that what I found was that I had a lot of secondary effects that was most noticeable for me. Like my bowel function just went to
Did you have IBS?
Yeah, the kind of IBS type symptoms. It's like I was gassy all the time. I had diarrhea. I was constipated. I was always uncomfortable. I always felt watered. Why is that? So I'm going to take a moment. I know we promised not to talk too much science, right?
Let's go for it.
All right. This will be quick. Okay. So, we talk about cortisol and adrenaline, right? Being our primary stress hormones, right? So what's interesting is that when we get into a state of like high cortisol and high adrenaline, what happens? It diverts blood away from our gut. Because if you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, right? Do you want 20% of your blood flow going into your gut? No. I mean, God or nature, whoever made us is pretty smart. Like, hey, we're going to redistribute that. We're going to make that go to your legs or our heart, our lungs. We're going to get away from the tiger or the overbearing boss or the cell phone that's pinging constantly, always having to respond to. So, stress in its simplest form is having to make a compensation to changes in the environment, right? So whether you're a bacteria, a zebra, or a human, right? We need to be able to make these accommodations. Our environment changes. I mean, it gets cold, it gets warm. Maybe it doesn't happen so much these days, but we need to find water, we need to find food, So really stress is our ability to make compensations to changes in our environment. I mean, if you're a single cell bacteria and the medium that you're in goes up 1 degree centigrade, there are changes that are taking place in that bacteria. Like, so this is a common component of all animals. But what's interesting is that in humans, we have the ability to maintain these pathways where we're in a stress-based response.
And like humans have the ability to actually get stuck in that state, right?
Right.
And not come out of it. Versus animals, they can come out of it pretty quickly. And most people can, unless they are chronically stressed. Then that becomes their new normal.
Right.
And the body does not do well under chronic stress.
Right. Yep. And you can measure that. I mean, there's something that, okay, here's a quick poll. Raise your hands. No, teasing. We can't see, guys. How many of you have like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, right? So there's a device on both of those devices, which is something called heart rate variability. So what happens is that as we get into a more stress-based physiology, our heart starts to beat more like a metronome. Okay, so you want to have a heartbeat that's not like a metronome, and a metronome is like, if you're
pretty steady.
If you're at 60 beats a minute, it's every second, like on that, like it's a second. What's healthier actually is if we have like the first beat between our heartbeats is 3/4 of a second. The next is 1.25. So there's 2 beats in 2 seconds, but there's variation between it. And even with mine, it's like I recognize that when I get myself wound up or stressed or not sleeping well for a number of days, what happens? My heart rate variability goes down, right? I start sleeping better, eating better, drinking more water.
Yeah.
It starts to go up. So, there are a number of different, measurements that we can learn to even follow in our own bodies.
Yeah.
Like, what's your bowel function? I mean, if you're having a bowel movement every 3 days, that's probably not normal. You're not able to get rid of the toxins. You're not, something's going on. That's not a normal bowel pattern. And then just for the people watching, probably normal bowel patterns are having 1 bowel movement a day, if not 2.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, guys, if you do check your heart rate variability, do it like once every few days, because these people, they will check it all day.
Okay.
That's the thing. God, don't do that. Okay. Check it maximum once per day. Other than that, take the watch off. Right. They will freak out over it.
Or even better. And again, I don't know what you do with people in terms of journaling and kind of keeping, because I'm not familiar with the specifics of your course, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to take a step back and learn about yourself, but don't go crazy doing that.
Yeah. We tell them not to track their symptoms or to track their sleep and all that, because then they get obsessed with it.
Right. Well, that's that balance is like being aware of how your body's doing, but not becoming this, obsessed about it, where you're, it's like, I check my heart rate variability 16 times a day.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Every time you checked,
it's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse because it's a stressor. You're needing to really know what to.
It's funny. Like, now I can look back and laugh about it, but when I had a heart rate monitor on, I would check and I'd be like, why is my heart rate 90? I'm just lying here. And I'm getting frustrated. And it's like, now it's 93. Now it's 96. Right. Now it's 105. And it's like, I'm getting mad every time, more and more frustrating. 10 minutes later, I'm looking, it's like 110.
Right.
And so it has like it had the opposite effect for me. So it was just really interesting how that worked. It's like a feedback loop.
Yep.
It's almost like my brain was looking for danger.
Yeah.
It was in such a stress state.
Exactly.
Looking for any signs of it.
Right. So what's the first step that you do with people to help them to get out of that sort of like chronic creating, because put it like this, your survival didn't depend on you checking your watch every minute. If you're starving, it makes sense. So you're able to generate a stress response. If you're being chased by a saber-tooth tiger, that's an appropriate, response to stress.
Yeah.
But when there's something that you're putting upon yourself, what do you do to help to get people to, one, recognize it, and then two, so I use the term extract, right? So kind of pull yourself out of this, like, this ongoing relationship with stress.
Yeah. So, number one, we really do our best to educate them on what's going on. Really, I'd say the word is demystify what's going on. Because when most people come to us, they've seen my YouTube videos and they kind of understand what's going on. And if they don't, then it is a huge wake-up call, because every symptom they feel, every racing thought they have, they feel like they're losing control. Like heart palpitation, that's immediately heart attack.
Having a heart attack.
Yeah, or my legs are sore, or my legs shutting down, or I feel, a side of my body feels numb. Did I just have a stroke? So all of these symptoms, there's like 10 different potential things that went wrong. So we just have to tell them, hey, as long as you've had your tests done, your scans done, you've had everything ruled out by doctors, right? This is a hypersensitive nervous system, right? So all your symptoms, you need to throw it under one umbrella. And the reason you're in this place right now is because you added way too much stress on your body. Maybe not intentionally, maybe you got like long COVID or something.
Right.
It's not always like your fault, but it's really educating them on the science of what's going on. Like what's the mechanism? Like why is it that when you stand up, your heart rate goes to 150 and you have POTS symptoms?
Right.
So when we kind of explain that, hey, everything kind of points to this hypersensitive nervous system, just like you were talking about,
right?
The inability to deal with stress, the inability to deal with adapting to change in an environment, right? Or anything. Once they realize that, then it kind of clicks with them. It's like, oh, that's what's been causing all of this. Because every time I have a symptom, I thought it's this or that or this or that, right? So once we tell them, hey, this is all coming from basically a hypersensitive nervous system, right? One thing that you haven't addressed yet, or most likely haven't addressed yet, is your mindset. So we actually have them go through an exercise where they write down all the things they're worrying about, either in the past or now, or something they're anticipating.
Right.
And we tell them, get everything onto paper.
Right.
Like everything. And if you have anything less than like 30 things, then you didn't do it. You didn't write enough.
You're not being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Some people, they'll write down like 5 things and they'll be like, okay, I did it. I'm like, you're just scratching the surface.
Right.
I can come up with 5 things in 10 seconds.
Right.
So write down at least 50 things. And once you see all of this on paper, it's going to click why you're so stressed and why you're always like amped up, because you have all of this noise going on in your head of, right, this could happen, and they're not aware of that. And then usually just from that, there's like a big mental shift where now the next step is, okay, how do we stop all those thoughts from happening? Right. And that's where the brain training aspect comes in. It's just repetition. Right. Continue swatting those thoughts away. Do not engage with them, those intrusive thoughts. Yeah. Because a lot of times the people we work with, that's kind of what's perpetuating a lot of the symptoms.
So that's really interesting. And I saw a statistic recently that said that humans have something like 32,000 different
thoughts in a day.
It's like some crazy number. Well, just imagine if half of those thoughts are something that are precipitating, they're negative, or they're worrying about something that happened or something that, that could happen. So now you got 16,000 negative thoughts a lot the day. And what's interesting is that in the practice of like meditation, one of the most fundamental things is to just there's a practice which says, you sit in meditation, you try to either focus on something or just clear your mind, right? When a thought comes into your mind, you don't qualify it. You don't say it's a bad thought, it's a good thought. It's all you do is you say, thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking.
Judge it.
I'm a human. That's what we do, is we think. So I'm going to push that aside again. I'm thinking again. That's okay. But it's easy for people to become very self-critical, right? And actually, one of the things that I've questioned is whether something like a meditation practice is good for everybody. And I'm not entirely sure that it is, because I mean, it's crazy that people would get stressed about meditating, but if somebody is really not in control of being able to say, I need to name it, I can identify it, and then hopefully pack it away or prioritize it. I'm sure that people sit with those 30 things on the list, and it's like, okay, you're fretting about the trip to Disneyland with your kids in 8 months and whether you're going to be able to take your kids on this ride. Yeah. Okay. That's not high priority. Okay, I'm concerned because the energy company is saying they're going to shut off my heat because I haven't paid my bill. Okay, that might take a little more priority. That might be something we need to address. The problem is that all those thoughts get clumped in together. Yeah. So our cortisol response, our adrenaline response is the same whether you're fretting about the trip to Disneyland maintenance or the fact that you're going to have your power shut off. So I think that's one of the challenges is really, and I love your practice of getting people to write stuff down.
Yeah, I think because we have to get them really involved. That's what I realized, because I've tried a couple other programs, and at the time that I did them, they're a bit different now, but at the time it was almost like they just kind of throw a bunch of information at you. It's like, okay, here's what you need to do, here's how, and it's not real. It wasn't really interactive. So when we get people to not just like buy into the vision and the ideas that we're sharing with them, but get them involved in the process. We're not just coming in there and saying, hey, do this. It's like, no, let's come up with a solution together, but get them involved in the process. It's so much more powerful, because they're actively on their own, unlocking certain things in their own mind as well. So I always tell people, it's like with recovery, when it comes to the mindset, you have to do things in a certain order. It's kind of like unlocking a combination lock. You can't just, even if you have the right things to do, you have to, if you don't do this and then this and this, then it's never going to work. So one is identify or understanding what's even going on, then identifying those thoughts. And then let's say there's like 54 thoughts or something that are recurring. Then I get them to pick the top 3 thoughts. What are the main 3 ones that are going on in your mind every single day? And 9 times out of 10, the number one thought is, will I ever actually get better?
And that goes back to our earlier discussion. We were saying, what's worse, is it the fatigue itself or the stress of not knowing if you can get better or where to turn, where do you start? That's why people wind up with that bag full of supplements.
Yeah, exactly.
And get all their fillings taken out and these big detoxes.
Yeah, like that, really invasive, right? So usually the number one thing is, will I ever actually get better? Number 2 is usually, I'm afraid that these symptoms one day my body's just going to give out. It's going to kill me. And the third thing can be anything. But what we've found is that these, I'd say top 3 things, they're also attached to like a bunch of other thoughts. But if you deal with those main 3 ones, then that kind of removes the foundation of all these other fears. Everything else is linked to that. It's kind of like, I showed a picture before on a call of like a supercomputer, and it had like 1,000 different plugs into the back of it. So there's a bunch of different small plugs, but then there's like this massive plug, like the real juicy plug that transfers all the data, removes the data. So you can pull on the small plugs, going to make some difference. But when you yank that big plug,
It's gonna make a big difference.
it's going to make a big difference. So we want to focus on, like you said, the high priority,
Right.
limiting beliefs or high priority fears or hindrances for recovery that are causing stress. And then after that, it's just learning to swat those things away, and then really trying to calm their whole mind down, right? Because, I mean, just because somebody is resting in bed,
Right.
not doing anything, just lying down all day, doesn't mean they're actually resting. So there's like the physical rest,
Right.
but people tend to leave out the mental and emotional rest, especially emotional rest.
Right.
I think emotion is the big one because, I mean, it is terrifying, right? There's some grief when you're sick too. Like if people are bedridden, then it's like you kind of lost your life in a way. You lost your identity, essentially.
Yep.
Like,
Well, particularly because a lot of people lose their jobs.
yeah,
You know, they lose their relationships.
Exactly.
You know, their marriage becomes strained. Their friends are like, we're done calling you up and inviting you somewhere. So I want to make a comment here because this is, you know, unknowingly, this was kind of like a nice segue.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about this. So, but what's interesting is that my mission in life, and actually my professional mission and what I'm working on now, is centers around empowering people to be best stewards of their own healthcare. Okay. The same way that you empower people to take control of their thoughts. I think that so many people in conventional medicine are really, you know, they're dished off by their doctors. It's like, oh, you're fine. It's like, you know, whatever. And, you know, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think there's a component of, you know, there are a number of people that suffer with fatigue. And we've talked about actually doing a talk about the medical side of things. I mean, there are people who are profoundly anemic in that low numbers of red blood cells.
That's some real things going on.
There are people that can have they can have Lyme disease, you know, they can have profound low thyroid function, right? And I think you're right. I think those are things that need to get addressed. But what's interesting is I guess what I'm trying to do is to help people to really become best stewards of their own healthcare, because, you know, you like it when people come into your program and this stuff has been thought about, right? But the problem is that so many people's doctors aren't taking the time to say, let's make sure that you're not really sick with something.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think I would have to say that in my experience, the vast number of people who get better from fatigue, it's because they've really gotten their thoughts under control.
Yeah.
And, you know, so my observation is when we're not taking control of our thoughts, then we start to get fallout from all those other symptoms. Like, you know, like we talked about how if you're diverting blood flow from your gut due to cortisol, your gut doesn't work as well, right? When our cortisol is high, our thyroid function gets low. It's just the way our body's built. So, and how many people really are hypothyroid, you know, have low thyroid function? You know, one thing which is interesting is that, you know, there've been a number of studies that show when people have high cortisol levels, you know, high stress levels, that we actually take a part of our brain and then it starts to shrink.
Yeah.
It's called the hippocampus. What's good is that it's not permanent.
Exactly.
So there's a real good example of neuroplasticity, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're seeing that the nerves are starting to regrow and reconnect with these dendritic, you know, these little connections between the different nerves. It starts with the power of the mind, right?
Yeah. And that's what I tell people too. It's like, if people, pretty much everybody in the program or everybody who has had CFS, at one point they were normal. They didn't have to worry about any of this stuff.
Right.
At one point they were normal, and then they got sick and they have this illness. So if you went from a normal person to feeling worse, you can also shift it the other way around. Right. That's the beauty of neuroplasticity. Right. And that's the power of the body. You know, as long as you rule out all the other tests and scans and you know, with just thinking, it can turn things around.
Right. And really, you know, one thing which I really try to emphasize in my writing and my videos and stuff like that is really the sense of being sensible. Right? I mean, not everybody has Lyme disease. Not everyone has black mold. Not everyone has heavy metals. Not everybody needs to get all their fillings taken out. And I think there's a pragmatic and sensible way that we can, you know, begin to assess. Like, you know, we were talking earlier about kind of this trifecta, right? You know, there are three things in my experience that really influence our health, and it's our biology, it's our environment, and our mind. So what are some things that anybody can do with just a little bit of self-reflection to look at their diet, you know, to look at, like, you know, ask yourself, how much alcohol am I drinking? You know, how much water am I drinking? How much Coca-Cola am I drinking? You know, how often am I preparing or having someone prepare some food for me that's healthy, and how often am I going to McDonald's? So with just some really simple interventions, I think that we can begin to, you know, see some really big changes. And then you start to augment that with working with someone's mind and positivity and neuroplasticity and repatterning behaviors. Then what happens is we start to see a feed forward degree of improvement. I think that's the tricky thing, is like, where do you catch people on that slide to kind of give them that little nudge to say, have some, change your belief, and, start to think about your potential differently. What are the different steps you can take here, today, now? And I think that some of the most important things we can do are hydrate, breathe, and eat good food. I mean, it's some of the most fundamental things that we can do that it's easy when you're not feeling well to side slip, right? It's like, I'm too tired to cook, I'm just going to call Domino's and order pizza. Yeah, that may not be the best nutritional choice for you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
How often when I get stressed do I find that I'm not breathing well? So it just takes a little bit of consciousness to say, take a deep breath. Here's what's kind of funny, and tell me about if you notice this as well, because I know you've thought a lot about the breath and breathing, right? Is when I find that my anxiety is starting to build, right? Because we started this talk saying that, we all have the capacity to probably backslide into some degree of fatigue, right? If you're feeling that, if I can take a moment and just take 1 or 2 deep breaths. So there's some conscious thought to it, saying, okay, I haven't been breathing well. It's like, I need to take 2 deep breaths. Take 2 big deep breaths. I can actually feel my physiology change. And I can tell you guys that the science supports this, that we were talking about that heart rate variability earlier. One of the number one things you can do to make that heart rate variability higher is take some deep breaths. This is science that's been known about since the 1950s or 1960s. Yeah. So are you sort of the same way? Like when you kind of feel like that anxiety is coming back, do you take 1 deep breath, 2 deep breaths, 3 deep breaths? I'm not saying you need to sit in meditation, breathing like a yogi for a half an hour.
I feel a massive shift.
Like
I do.
1 deep breath, just like you could just sort of feel it fill your body and fill your veins and begin to oxygenate. And it's a really simple intervention. Yeah. But it's so potent.
Yeah. I feel like, because I try to break things down as simple as possible for these people. A deep breath is kind of like cooling down the nervous system. Yep. Like if I'm getting stressed, I see the nervous system as like this thing that when it gets worked up, it's like buzzing. I actually have a video coming out soon on this channel, but it's like it's buzzing and tingling because the nervous system, the nerves run off electricity, right? So I almost just imagine someone crank that voltage up and buzzing. Yeah. So a deep breath or something that helps calm you down is literally like cooling down the nervous system, returning the voltage down. And I do feel it right with 1 simple breath.
So one thing the people who are watching this can ask themselves is, what is that one thing that brings you a sense of peace? It might be breathing. It might be just closing your eyes and just imagining that beach that you were on, at some time in the past when you've got a really nice memory of things. These are all simple steps that you can take to help to, again, just like desensitize that nervous system. I'll often say that the nervous system is kind of like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, right? So, it's just poised to be like amped up by something. So there are, a number of different things we can probably do to help to minimize that.
Yeah.
And I think the breathing is a really good start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see what Instagram's saying. Let's see.
Whoops. This is not taking people on here. People are popping in now. Any questions? Not really.
Oh, this person asks, I've got OCD as well as long COVID, so it feels like my thoughts are doubly sticky. Any tips for OCD? I mean, there's so many people with OCD in our program. What we tell them is like, it's kind of the same approach. It's just you have not a few more, but a handful more thoughts to deal with, but it's the same thing. Because people, we'll teach them the approach, but then they'll say, I have OCD, so I can't do this, or I have this thing, so I can't do this. And we can say, no, that's an excuse you're telling yourself, because it is hard work. For everybody's hard work to do the brain training and implement neuroplasticity. So in terms of OCD, it's the same approach.
Yeah, it's really the same approach. I mean, it's a symptom of everything that we've been talking about for the last hour, which is allowing oneself to have a nervous system, which is upregulated.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and what I think OCD is it's almost like a hyper meticulous desire to control one's environment based in what's likely unfounded fears.
Yeah.
Right. I don't understand. I don't mean to ever discount anybody's belief. I mean, as you know, our perception is the way that the world is, so if I have it in my mind that I need to jump up from this interview and go wash my hands because I've got too many bacteria on them right now, I can try to explain to someone until the cows come home that we have more bacteria than you could ever have, and you may not fully wash them all off. But the thing is that it's being respectful of the fact that that's somebody's reality, and you have to kind of work with them, starting there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So that's what I would say. It's the same approach. It just may take a little bit more effort, maybe a lot more effort, but absolutely neuroplasticity. That's the beauty of it, is you can change the way you think about those things. So we've seen people turn it around like 100%. So
you've worked with people and seen like bad OCD that has gotten better.
Yeah.
That's great, because I can tell you from an allopathic physician standpoint that I don't, there's
like Ritalin or Adderall.
Yeah, there's Ritalin and Adderall.
Yeah,
and some medications and probably some off-label like antipsychotic drugs and stuff. And so, you realize in medicine what happens is that there are a set of antidepressant drugs. And what's funny is that we think we know how these drugs work, but we're really not sure, But if you're not doing well on that antidepressant drug, what's commonly reached for is kind of like a next tier drug, which is typically an antipsychotic drug.
Yep.
But people they're not psychotic, but so in other words, we start adding, all these different drugs are additive, and then what happens? Then you start to get the side effects of the medications, and you get alterations of your neurotransmitters, and then
you're downward spiral.
It's a downward spiral. And I think it's, I would say that, really the premise of my practice is to try to get people off of drugs, right? Yeah. I do think that there's a time and place for drugs to help, bridge something. So let's just say there's I would never prescribe antidepressants. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't believe in the use of those drugs. I think that we have a lot of different potential interventions to get people better, many of which we've talked about in this, in this talk. But let's say somebody is like besides themselves, that they haven't slept for a week or something like that. Is it reasonable to say, here's a sleeping pill that's going to knock you out for a couple nights? I think so. I think it's reasonable to, maybe use medication sparingly to bridge the gap, to maybe get some reset.
Yeah.
Do I believe in taking, sleeping pills every night of the week? No, I don't.
Yeah.
And I think that, if that's what you're doing, you need to take a step back and figure out what is this reality that you're creating that is keeping you up?
Yeah. And I think as long as, like, the way I see medication, I definitely think there's a time and place for it, as long as there is a plan in place.
Right.
Versus a doctor just saying, oh, you have that, let's deal with that here, just keep taking this.
Right.
Because my doctor, he put me on medication as well, but he actually explained, like, the reason we're doing this is so that you can implement these practices and it'll be easier for you.
Right.
From these practices, because you're very extreme, you're in a bed, like you're having panic attacks every single day. So we need something to kind of dampen your nervous system. You can get better without this medication. It'll just help speed it up. By the way, you won't be on this forever, because I asked him too. I was like, I don't want to be one of these cases where, like, I'm on it forever, and if I miss a dose, I wake up in the forest naked somewhere.
Right.
And he was like, don't worry, that's not going to happen.
Right.
It's all under control, and this is just a stepping stone.
Right.
But we're going to pull you off it. Like, it's not even a big deal. I was like,
I was trying to envision you naked in the outside of Vancouver. It's like, how easily you probably got lost, right?
Oh, by bear or cougar or something.
Right.
But that was actually my fear, because I was thinking rationally at the time. Like, I've heard these stories. Am I going to be like that case where I just, like, snap if I miss a dose? Right. But when it comes to medication, there's definitely time and place. And I think if your doctor understands how it works with CFS or nervous system, then absolutely.
Right.
As long as it's not just like guessing or throwing darts at a board. Right. Like, hope this works.
And that's what it typically is, because we started this talk by saying that what's tricky about fatigue is that there's no defined measurement.
Yeah.
There's no lab test that says, here, your fatigue level is 8, it's supposed to be 5, and you've got high fatigue. So it's, fatigue is a subjective measurement. Now, there are a number of things that can be looked at medically, like measurements of inflammation or nutritional deficiencies. Things like thyroid are pretty important. And, on my YouTube channel, I try to educate people to really understand, like, what's normal thyroid? How can you advocate for yourself when you're talking to your doctor to make sure that, what your needs are in your best interests, you're in alignment with your doctor for your best interest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing what you're doing and getting the word out there about CFS and like how to recover, especially coming from a doctor. Because that's so rare. I mean, there were times when I would get wheeled into my doctor's office or carried on someone's shoulders. I remember this one time, my mom had to get her friend to like bring me on his shoulders because I couldn't walk. He just dumped me in the chair in that neurologist's office, and the neurologist was like, "Hey, well, hold your arms up," shining bright lights in my eyes, and he's like, "Yeah, well, you look fine to me." And same thing with my family doctor. Like, he just dumped me in that chair, and I'm having a panic attack in the doctor's office.
Right.
And my doctor's listening to my heartbeat. Here's the palpitations, and he's like, "You seem normal to me."
Right.
Like, well, how can I help you? I'm like, "I don't know. You tell me, man. You're the doctor." Like, I don't know what I don't know.
What about this is normal? I can't stand up from the chair.
Yeah.
And I can barely make a sentence.
Yeah.
And, I do see people that over time can really start to have some real physical symptoms.
Yeah, deconditioning is a real thing.
Right.
And we see that a lot, deconditioning. And they're like, well, if it's all in my mind, then how come my legs are shaking when I stand up? And we're like, it's not all in your mind. There's actually,
Yeah.
when we say mind, we say it's like in your brain. Your brain is in between your head. So is it in your head?
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah.
But it's in your nervous system. And the reason your legs are shaky is because you stood up for like 5 minutes every day for the last 3 months.
Right.
Anybody would have shaky legs.
Right.
So it does cross over to that physical aspect. Right. Where, or maybe you're in a dark room for weeks at a time. Yeah. When those lights turn on, it's going to hurt your eyes. Right. Or your legs will become weak. It'll be hard to even sit up when you take a shower.
Right.
You'll feel dizzy because you're not upright in a long time.
Yeah, that's great that you recognize that and help people to realize that this is part of the recovery, right?
It is.
And it's part of, again, like being able to learning how to name it and identify it and reconcile it, right? Because I think the biggest thing that we struggle with is the unknown.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't know if we're going to get better. We don't know what foods we need to eat. We don't know what's contributing to this. We don't know who to trust. We don't know how many supplements to take. I mean, this is, part of it is just really learning the skills to develop a mindset towards one that's directed towards healing, right? And I think people can get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's a deep question. Curious.
Are we ready for this?
What kind of motivates you and drives you to kind of do the work you do? Because you have a YouTube channel. For everybody has a YouTube channel. You have a Facebook group where you teach people about this stuff. You kind of gone a separate path from most doctors,
right?
Who kind of stay in just the medical system,
right?
Have you gone down this path because you've experienced it yourself and you've experienced the frustrations of not being able to figure this out? Or like, what really drives you to and send information out there?
That's a good question. I think it's there are a lot of things that keep me coming back, and one is, the simple answer is that I want to help as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the things I struggle with as a medical doctor is recognizing that conventional medicine lacks the ability to really, make coherent, reasonable investigations, to rule out the bad stuff, right? But then there's sort of like this, the whole other end of the spectrum is natural and alternative medicine, and people are spending so much money and investing in testing or providers or practitioners that may not be well equipped to really help them. And what I found in working with a lot of people is it's really, you need to kind of work with the best of both worlds, right? And again, I'm not advocating antidepressants or ADHD medications and stuff like that. I'd much rather see my patients not use those things. But really, my mission is to help people become best advocates of their own healthcare. And I think that so what keeps me going is I believe that the medicine of the future is characterized by people advocating for themselves. And I always think that there's a time when we're going to be able to learn to be the best representatives for our own healthcare with the information that's out there on the internet, with accessibility of different tests that we can do on ourselves that we can actually learn. And I think the medicine's great. Don't get me wrong. If I get hit by a car and I, break my leg, you give me a surgeon, give me anesthetic, give me antibiotics, give me a titanium rod in my leg, I'll take all those things. But there are like 5 chronic conditions that are killing 90% of people in developed countries. That's like the United States and Canada. And that's stroke, diabetes, hypertension, COPD, and cancer. Okay. And each of these conditions is preventable, if not treatable. And again, don't get me started on the cancer question, right?
Yeah.
But because at that point the horse might be out of the barn, right? But so many of these chronic conditions can be treated with ways that aren't addressed by conventional medicine. So my mission is to basically say, look, let's find a sensible middle ground. Let's use good data and good research to support it. And then really what's kind of cool is that we can begin to use computers and artificial intelligence to, one, demonstrate that these interventions that we're doing are getting people better. Because I think part of the problem is that, conventional medicine right now is basically saying, oh, all that stuff Miguel's doing is woo-woo. There's no science behind that, right? It's not true. There's plenty of science behind it. Just because that doctor doesn't know the science exists doesn't mean there's no science. So my mission is to really help to define a new way that people become better, more empowered is to represent themselves in a healthcare setting, and to approach some of these things sensibly, and to incorporate. So there's a term in medicine which is multifactorial, right? And I know we promised we weren't going to use any big medical terms, right? Multifactorial means there's a lot of things contributing. And that's what I think we need to be doing, is looking at our health from a multifactorial perspective. How can we control our environment? How can we learn how to breathe? How can we drive our mind so our neuroplasticity works for us? How can we use our diet to help to guide the way that our genetics work? How can we modify our environment? And sometimes these are simple things like blackout shades that you can put in your room, or I think one of the biggest recommendations I make for people is that they don't become so engaged in their cell phone. And I was sending you a text when we were setting this up, and I saw, Miguel has turned his notifications off. And I was like, that's fantastic.
Oh, was it? I didn't even notice. Oh, I probably automated that.
Maybe you're missing text.
No, I probably automated that because I am addicted to my phone.
Right.
Yeah. So unless it's dead.
Right. So I think but there are people who are, like I can't tell you how many patients I've sat with who they're paying me for my time, right? And the phone's on the table, and we're talking, and I hear the phone go beep beep, and she'll stop and take it.
No way. As they're talking,
as we're talking. So here's somebody. This is a good example of. Remember we talked earlier about how stress, which drives so much of what we're talking about right now, is any alteration in our environment that we need to respond to. Yeah. So this, I said one woman. I've had a dozen who's happened. I've seen this happen where I just kind of sit back and go, "What are you checking?" Like, if the house is on fire, answer your phone. But so that's a continual compensation that she's making to her environment, which is you're saying to the doctor, beep beep. So that just interrupted the flow of our conversation. It was something. So again, I think it's reasonable to use the phone as a tool, right? Yeah. But I think a lot of people need to look at their cell phones and the way that they're engaging with social media and stuff, and really ask, is it to our benefit? Yeah. Is it creating more stress?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot in the program, right? Like just how stimulating the phone is. Mm-hmm. It's just, it doesn't seem like much, but when you're scrolling, your brain is working really hard to unpack the shapes and colors and sounds and noises, and it is working really hard.
Right. I don't think the human brain was really made to engage in the way that we use it.
Yeah, especially with technology nowadays, it was definitely not primed for that. Like my doctor was telling me, in the whole human history, however long it is, let's say if this is the timeline, there's like a tiny speck over here where technology was just introduced. Mm-hmm. But everything before that, there was like 10,000 times less stimulus during the day. Right. So it's like the brain hasn't actually had that much time to adapt to this much stimulus. Like the iPhone came out, 2008, 2009, social media came out 2010, 11. Right. So it's like a whole nother world of stimulus that like we just haven't adapted to. Right. I think in my perspective, that's why there's so much anxiety and people are so alert nowadays.
So is that part of your program? I mean,
if we get people to be part of it, like taper off the phone usage. Depends on their certain plan. Like we have individual plans for people. Some people are less addicted to phones than others, but also depends what stage you're at too. And we also take into account like, okay, what are their capabilities cognitively and also physically? Right. So it's there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it is definitely a big thing. Tell everybody, just beware, guys. Watch your screen time.
Right. So that's it. I think to really heal, it's useful to have a guide and a plan. Right. And I think that's super important to actually, have something that creates some order to all this, because I think one of the biggest challenges is people don't know who to trust, who to listen to, what program to join, what what diet to take, what supplement to take, what nutrient to add to their regimen, and it just becomes overwhelming for people.
Yeah, definitely. So for you, I mean, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on. I've got a YouTube channel. Just look up Dr. Scott Resnick, MD. I have a Facebook group that I call Fatigued to Fantastic. And what I try to do there is to address, really it's more the medical side of things. It's creating forum where people feel safe to, express their concerns, ask me questions. I'll post, like encouraging thoughts, dietary recommendations, links to videos and stuff like that. And I'm in the process of developing a program, which is called Fatigue to Fantastic, and it's at fatiguetofantastic.com. And what this is it's really addressing health from this 360-degree view that we've discussed. So it includes, mind and body practices, exposes people to potential laboratory studies that you might want to investigate to know that your thyroid's working well, your cortisol's working well, your gut is working well. It harnesses the power of community, because I think that's and as you know, that is so huge to have a community where people feel trusted and safe. And so community is a big part of it. And really the program I'm building is to give people the tools they need to, like we said earlier, be best stewards of their own healthcare. And I think we're in an exciting time. I think there's a lot of potential. So my proposal is that we do what we can to make doctors available for the surgeries, for the emergencies, for the procedures, and then for all of these other things that we're getting medicated and drugged with. Let's first look at how we can use all these tools that we've discussed, whether it's diet, modifying environment, limiting your cell phone use, even like some of the smallest amount of activity is so important. And keeping the body movement. I mean, even if you're doing nothing more than getting out of bed and walking around your room a few times a day, if you can make a 1% change relative to the day before, that slope is going up, right? So, get up from bed, make a pass around your room before you go lay down again, because the next day, if you can make 2 passes around your room, before you know it, you're going to be, leaving the room and going to a different part of the house. You're going to be leaving the house. So it's I think the important thing is to remember that it's a process, right? And there are a lot of people out there that can help to guide people with good science-backed, reproducible, and valuable information to get people better.
Yeah, no, I love it. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today?
I think in closing, what I would like to say is that you guys can do this. You can get better. You can heal. I mean, I think what Miguel is doing is so fantastic because, what I see as a doctor is I see the downstream effects of what happens to the body when the mind's not working well. So I do think there's some time and a place to do some work on your gut or to work on, some supplements, maybe balance cortisol, for example. But I think that I just want to tell people you can get better and also be compassionate with yourselves, understand that you didn't ask to get into this place, right? Nobody wants to be fatigued. Nobody wants to feel like they're having brain fog, but they're having, myalgias, pains, etc. Know that it's not your fault. And with time and with some good guidance, every one of you can get better. And I think that's what I just want to leave people with, that, be optimistic. I want you to take that mindset of what are the steps that I can do to really begin to get well, because we can do it. And you and I are living proof. I know I wasn't as bad as you were, but man, I was bad.
Yeah, you see it. And the cool thing is you have all the knowledge and data from all your years of medical school and able to put all that together and really simplify it into kind of your approach today.
Right. And that's it. So that we can get people better, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to take a little bit of what we both offer, right? I mean, I know that you've got skill sets and parts in your program that I don't understand. I mean, I might know the big picture. I haven't come up with the plan and the program like I can do, and I think it's so valuable. And conversely, my mission in medicine is to help empower all you folks to really learn about your bodies, to make the best decisions, to spend your healthcare dollars wisely, to turn around your life to one of focus and energy and vibrancy and clarity, and really kind of squeeze all that we can out of this amazing thing we call life, right?
Yeah.
And, and like I feel blessed to have been able to set this up with you because we've been going back and forth. And it just so happened that you took a birthday celebration, right? Up here in
beautiful Whistler, British Columbia.
British Columbia. Yeah, check it out. And And we had an opportunity to finally sit and talk.
Yeah.
And I feel really fortunate to have had this opportunity to meet with you.
Yeah. And it's really cool sitting down with Dr. Resnick over here, because I mean, I know there's so many coaches out there, so many programs out there. And, I support pretty much all of them, right? Any program or anybody or anything that wants to help people get better, I'm all for it. And people say like, oh, competition, how about that? Well, I mean, there's more people who need help than there is people providing help. Right. So like, but any way I can help you grow and reach more people, I'm all for it. If it can help more people, then that's a win at the end.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's it. We want to help you guys get better.
Yeah.
And my dream is to see a world where people are learning to get better without using medications, empowering yourself to use these different practices that we've talked about to turn around your health and to live a long life. Let's just explore this beautiful world we live in, right? And have cool conversations like this too, right?
Exactly. So hope you guys enjoy that video. If you did enjoy that video, make sure to hit that comment section down below, hit the like button, and make sure to go follow his social media, his YouTube, his Facebook group. Go reach out to him. I'll put the links down below. But again, hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let us know your favorite part, your biggest takeaway from this video, and maybe we'll do another interview.
Yeah,
as well.
And reach out to me. I respond to people. I give people my my email address all the time and see if you have questions. And my mission is to help you guys to make some good choices. And
Yes.
hey, that was good talking.
Awesome. All right, you guys enjoy that.
You guys have a good day. Be well.